your code a big old ball of mud? Or maybe you work on one at your engineering place of work where you work. What is a big old ball of mud code base? I'm about to get into that because I got a little website article review to do. Let's check it out and talk about it. This is a computer science thing. It's pretty old. From Saturday, June 26, 1999 to be exactly, by Brian Fulte and Joseph Yoder from the Department of Computer Science in Illinois. Urbana campaign? I don't know. So I came across this from some subreddit and thought it was really interesting. And oh boy, my first code bases that I wrote. Am I guilty or am I guilty of the big old ball of mud? Yes, very. So this is a very, very long article about patterns and design of code. And I just want to kind of do a quick video review of it because it is pretty darn long, but oh boy, did it hit home for me and some of the stuff I've worked on in the past. Would highly recommend slapping this bad boy right into your reading list. And yeah, have at it because it's a good read. It really is. Alright, so what is the big ball of mud? Big ball of mud is a casually, even haphazardly structured system. In organizations, if one can call it that, it is dictated more by expediency than design. Yet its enduring popularity cannot merely be indicative of a general disregard for architecture. What? Your code base is all over the place. You just slap everything together. You're just like, I got this working, throw it in there. Got this working, slap that in there too. And you end up with code that's tied together in all sorts of weird ways, and trying to modify it once it grows, it's like trying to figure out a ball of mud, basically. It's nuts. All right. So a number of additional patterns emerge out of big ball of mud. We're going to discuss them, and two principal questions underlie these patterns. Why so many existing systems architecturally, and just what can we do to improve them? What can we do to improve them? That's also the important. All right, so as you might expect, it's all about spaghetti code, haphazardly structured, sprawling, sloppy, duct tape, baling wire, spaghetti code jungle. I love that term, spaghetti code jungle. Look at this guy over here, just messing with. All right. So how do these come apart or come to fruition to begin with? Usually, there's two different ways, and oh boy am I guilty. I wrote this program called DM Power for Dungeons and Dragons Dungeon Masters, and it was one of the first big pieces of software I wrote, and I basically just threw it together and got it working however I could, and it became a big ball of mud, and it still is to this day, but it works fine. I don't know, maybe other people wouldn't call it a big ball of mud, but I definitely would, because I wouldn't do it the same if I went back and did it again. So it's basically another term for spaghetti code. So you wonder, how does this come to fruition? Well, one of the big things they talk about is throwaway code. So sometimes you just need something to work. You're looking for examples. You find a good example, maybe online, maybe on Stack Overflow, maybe from a tutorial, and you take that working example and you just put it in your code base. You just slap it in there. It was supposed to be a one-time example, throwaway code just to teach, but then it ended up in a code base. And that's not how it's generally supposed to work. Usually you want to carefully architect it in there so that it's maintainable, rather than just throwing in chunks and hoping for the best. So usually that happens when people are in a hurry and you want to kind of get it out there as soon as possible. All right, so there is a lot of little terminologies in here, like keeping it working, piece metal growth, shearing layers, sweeping it under the rug. We're not going to go over all of them, but I just want to give you the general point. So the piece metal growth thing is basically where you're just attaching little random pieces here and there, and it's just growing, but at kind of a random rate, or random systems are just kind of popping up, and you're just sticking them to some part of the code somewhere, and it's just kind of randomly growing, and no real rhyme or reason. Well, maybe there's a reason, but definitely no rhyme. And generally what you want to do is refactor. A sustained commitment to refactor can keep a system from subsiding into a big ball of mud. But when new things come out or you come across new systems, rather than just kind of slapping it on the side somewhere, what you actually probably want to do is refactor and implement it in there in a way that really makes sense. Did I mention this article is really long? We're gonna blast through it. You can imagine what sweeping it under the rug is. It's basically when you have an area and you just kind of prettyify it a little bit, maybe put a little tiny front end and ignore everything else. There. Totally guilty. Don't feel bad. Now, one of the big forces that seems to cause this is being in a hurry. Time, because sometimes you gotta meet deadlines and you don't have time to refactor and design and architect everything perfect. You gotta have it done and get it out there as soon as possible. This is not necessarily a bad thing. However, someone else should probably be looking at your code. This is also something that inexperienced coders might do, or someone that's not so committed to architecture might do when they're working on a code base. So let's talk a little about cost, because architecture is expensive. It is pretty expensive to put everything together perfectly. As it says here, programmers with the ability to discern and design quality architectures are reputed to command a premium. Yes, you might already know this, but good programmers tend to be pretty expensive to hire. They're not just gonna make your great code base for super cheap. If you hire a inexperienced programmer, they're gonna have to learn a lot of things on the job. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. What that means is you're gonna get a lot more mud and a lot more spaghetti, but if they're smart, they're still gonna be able to get it to work. And maybe they'll be able to fix it up later. So this is one of those things that just comes with experience. Often, initial versions of a system are vehicles whereby programmers learn what pieces must be brought into play to solve a particular problem. I definitely ran into this a lot while designing my game engine, Ancient Archer. And I still do to this day. I just did a big refactor, and it was a good time. I streamed some of it. Yeah, that's basically an advertisement, because this video is sponsored by me in my decision to make videos, so consider slapping buttons and supporting me. Skill. Programmers' different level of skill as expertise, predisposition, and temperament. That's kind of a no-brainer. We already know that, don't we? Let's move on. The old shantytown spaghetti code, big ball of mud. Those are the different things you might hear it called. Typically, it's spaghetti code. I really like the big ball of mud analogy. I think that's a fun one. Shanty towns are usually built from common, inexpensive materials and simple tools, using relatively unskilled labor. Wait a second, unskilled? That's no way to talk about your fellow coder. There is little overall planning and regulation of growth. Oh boy. There are a lot of quotes in here, like this one about skill from Ralph Johnson. On average organizations will have average people. You need to deliver quality software on time and under a budget. Often, the people who control and manage the development process simply do not regard architecture as a pressing concern. They just want to see it pushed out and finished. But what happens here is the people planning it who want the thing done, they don't know about the workmanship. They don't want to pay for it because it's not a thing. If it works, then it's fine. Ship it. That's how this vicious cycle is often born. Now, this is tricky to talk about in a way that is productive, because it's easy to get in your headspace that the big ball of mud or spaghetti is just totally bad and you should never do it. But the thing is, you have to do it sometimes. It happens. There's not a perfect solution other than to take time properly architecting it, because sometimes it's raining and you just need to get a roof up, or you need to get that umbrella up so you don't get soaked, theoretically. But one of the things that is the cause of that is you focus on features and functionality, then focus on architecture and performance. While this is too long to all put in a video essay, I'm going to just highlight a few more important pieces of this and kind of fly through the rest. We'll see here that there are some general statements and rules, such as, well, architecture has been undervalued for so long that many engineers regard life with a big ball of mud as normal. And in fact, some engineers even get quite skilled at navigating these quagmires. Been there. How many times do you follow your functions only to not understand why it would be going here or there? Apparently, this term originated from a guy named Brian Merrick. The term appears to have arisen in the 70s as a characterization of Lisp. Oh boy. Lisp does kind of get really messy and hard to maintain, if you ask me. Alright, looks like we're gonna finally get into ways to combat the big ball of mud, although some of them might be somewhat obvious already. Just the act of scrutinizing your code and just refactoring, repairing it, rehabilitating it. That's one of the ways you can combat it, and they're calling that here exposing it to daylight. And wait for it, the term everyone hates to hear, pair programming. Yeah. You can't code alone all the time, or can you? A lot of people think pair programming is just a total waste of time, but with two heads rather than one, sometimes one of the people can take a more directorial approach while the other one does the actual coding. So in this respect, one drives while the other rides shotgun. And in this way, the code is often more heavily scrutinized and talked about rather than just thrown together. There are 3 ways to deal with big balls of mud, it says. The first is to keep the system healthy, conscientiously alternating periods of expansion and consolidation. Refactoring and repair enhance a system's architecture and structure as it evolves. And now we've talked about this next one before. Throw away the code and start over. The Jim Keller method. I made a video on that before. It is a real thing, and sometimes it needs to be done. But don't do it too quickly. As I learned very recently, actually just this weekend, as I was figuring out skeletal animations and hammering away at it, putting time in, reading, I finally solved the problem I was having for the last couple weeks, and it turned out to be a lot smaller than I thought it would be. Turns out I was looking in the wrong place, but I was literally about to throw away everything and start over when all I really had to do was change the right lines of code. So be careful throwing away too soon to try to fix an unknown problem. Try to understand the problem you're fixing before you rewrite it. That would be my personal recommendation there. The reconstruction pattern explores this drastic but frequently necessary alternative. The third is to simply surrender to entropy and wallow in the mire. Oh my. Throw away code. The quick hack. Kleenex code, disposable code, scripting, killer demo, permanent prototype, boomtown. I love the pictures they throw in here. They're just spot on, aren't they? We talked about this briefly, but this is just about getting things done quickly, and just sometimes you want to demo, you want to show something, and you end up with just hacked together code that's very quick, but it looks nice. I mean, the results look nice. It does the job, does what it's supposed to, and so you end up saying, all right, just put it in there and let's move on. And that's where this problem arises, because you keep doing that and it just becomes a giant unorganized mess, basically. So as you're adding in this new throwaway code, usually what you're considering is, well, you want to keep it working, and you got to make some premier considerations, they say, deciding whether to extend or enhance the system. And sometimes you got to do a little reconstruction there to get it to work right and look nice. But you don't want to be doing the old piece metal thing where you're just kind of adding a plate to the side. Alright, now we get to piece metal growth. We've already talked about this a little bit. Urban sprawl. Iterative incremental development. As you might expect, this is literally just adding in little pieces here and there, extending the shanty town, adding a couple more houses, and just kind of hacking together a new road. No particular rhyme and reason, we just need another one, so put it in there kind of thing. The biggest example of this seems to be about urban planning and how sometimes towns and developments grow in ways that aren't exactly planned just because they need to account for more space, more people coming in, more land ownership. I think you probably get the point of this one, so we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. And basically the way to combat this is to plan it out. Take some time to structure it in there properly. Alright, let's talk about the keep it working. Vitality, baby steps, daily build, first do no harm. Now I think this one has really taken something of its own, because we see it often with things like continuous integration, where every build needs to succeed whenever we push new code, otherwise we don't throw it out. So if the build succeeds and passes all the tests, then you are keeping it working. And that's a fine thing. But also you got to make sure you're not falling victim to any of these other anti-patterns where it's growing in unsustainable ways. Maintenance needs have accumulated, but an overhaul is unwise, since you might break the system. I have definitely experienced this. You probably have too. My personal example that comes to mind is from this piece of software I mentioned earlier, Empower. It was not built with any particular architecture in mind. I was very new at the time I started writing this, and when I added new classes, new systems, new feats, new skills, and just new features in general, I basically just hacked them in there. And oh boy, did it get messy and messy-er. But you know what? I never really refactored it, not once it was working. I basically just kept it working. That was my only goal when adding stuff, was to keep it working. Now I wasn't aware of a lot of the patterns or even nightly builds or anything like that when I was building this, and I never really did. I never really spent the proper time to do that. This actually works fine. It works great. It does what it's supposed to do, and I'm not particularly encouraged to refactor, because this is totally unfunded free piece of software, and I don't even think I'm allowed to get it funded, because if I ever get paid for this piece of software, I could probably get sued by Wizards of the Coast, because I'm using so much of their stuff that I have no idea if it's legal or not. I was basically building it for me, and for me, I just wanted it to work. Alright, I'm getting a little sidetracked now. But I think you get the point of keeping it working. Sometimes you might be adding cool stuff and it's all going great, but it ends up just getting uglier and uglier, and you really actually need to think about it and refactor some of this growth. So let's talk about shearing layers. This is a pretty interesting one, because it's sort of like, you know, when they put together a new building, you often have all this temporary scaffolding up around it so that the workers can get up there and do what they need to do and place the initial structure, and that way they can build around that. This is something like that. So your code is going to grow, you're going to have temporary pieces in there, and sometimes what you got to do is take off those old layers that you no longer need, that once served a purpose but no longer do. The layers change at different rates, but the site is eternal. Your piece of software and what it does is there, but some of the scaffolding no longer belongs once you've gotten to a point where you need to build better, more permanent pieces. And this is somewhat about taking out obsolete code. There are some tips about how to handle this, and it's really all about adaptability and stability and sustainability, and factoring your system so that the artifacts change at similar rates together. Sweeping it under the rug. House cleaning, pretty face quarantine, hiding it under the bed, rehabilitation, Potemkin village. I don't know what that means. There are so many analogies for this, but I think this says it in the most plain way. If you can't make a mess go away, at least you can hide it. One of the most spectacular examples of sweeping a problem under the rug is the concrete sarcophagus that the Soviet engineers constructed to put a 10,000-year lid on the infamous reactor number 4 at Chernobyl. How exactly do you fix that problem? You kinda gotta just cap that one, but it is definitely swept under the rug. The problem's still there. There is no easy fix for that one. But when you're coding and you have some really messy code, do you hide it behind an interface or do you fix it up? Now, we've probably all been guilty of hiding the ugliest private code behind some sort of proper interface, but this tends to grow in ways that is somewhat unmaintainable, because when you come back to that code under the rug, it's often just all over the place, particles, and when you get in there you get all dirty and you're like, what am I doing? Overgrown, tangled, haphazard spaghetti code is hard to comprehend, repair, extend, and tends to grow even worse if it is not somehow brought under control. Well-engineered code should be comprehensible and, they say, attractive. What is attractive code exactly? I guess just well put together code, nice variable names, that sort of thing. I like to think of this as about headspace. When you go to work on something, you have to put all that temporary knowledge in your headspace about what you're working on, like how some of these systems that aren't frequently used work, what variables it's editing, and what it does, and all of that. However, when you have this really messy code and you try to do that, it ends up also spaghettifying your brain, or at least that's what happens to me, and it takes a lot longer to make the changes you want to change because you got to wrap your head around these oddities that shouldn't be like this, basically. So the best way to make it go away is to make it super nice, rather than restricting the border, restricting the area. Reconstruction, the total rewrite, demolition, throw away the first one, start over. I love doing this. This is one of my favorite things. And for me personally, one of the reasons I love doing this is because I just love typing out code and thinking about it. That is just something that I inherently find fun. And that's probably one of the reasons I'm a programmer, is I just like doing it. I don't even care what I'm working on sometimes. I just want something to work on so that I can have it in my head. I don't want to be vegging out on media and stuff all day. I want to be cranking my brain whistle. That's something I just made up. Don't quote me on that. Also, one of the reasons coders tend to like gaming is because it has us critically thinking all the time. So when do you do this? Well, basically when your code has declined to the point where it's beyond repair or comprehension. This can happen quite suddenly and rapidly when you're adding in new parts and you're putting new pieces in. Sometimes you just, you're kind of attaching things, getting it working for the moment, and after a while, it becomes somewhat of a mess. And sometimes what you need to do is you need to refactor it with these new systems in mind and take out all the obsolete code. This can be one of the most expensive things time-wise. However, it can also be one of the most beneficial in the long run. Now, some people won't do this because they see it as admitting defeat. Sometimes it's easier to throw a system away and start over. Starting over can be seen as a defeat at the hands of the old code, or a victory over it. One reason to start over might be that the previous system was written by people who are long gone. Doing a rewrite provides a new personnel with a way to re-establish contact between the architecture and the implementation. I like this, and I think this is pretty valid. Often, if programmers are handing off old software, just trying to figure out what and why can take a lot of time, and just refactoring the whole thing, rewriting the entire thing can be better. It might take a little bit more time, but you'll have a better understanding of it. And I think that's actually quite important, and I've done that myself quite a bit. I've often just tossed out old code and started an entirely new version, basically because I was having a hard time wrapping my head around how the systems were working, and it seemed like it would be a good exercise to basically rewrite the whole thing. Another motivation for building a new system might be that you feel you've got the experience you need to do the job properly. This is a good one, especially for new coders. It is true. So one of the ways to get experience is you just need to get in and do it. And you might be inexperienced when you're putting things together. I have definitely been there. Pretty much all my first software that I wrote, I was very inexperienced when I was doing it. And I knew that it wasn't going to be revolutionary, that it wasn't going to be something that the world used and looked up to as the next big thing, but I really wanted the experience, and the assignments I was getting at university didn't feel like they were giving me proper experience. So I came up with my own ideas and implemented my own things. And once I was halfway through or through with a big section of it, I often came across new patterns or new ideas or learned things that I didn't know before, and I just thought, oh man, if I only knew this sooner, I would have wrote this differently. Perfect time to rewrite, because now you can rewrite it with your new experience in mind, and it feels so good. I've been there. I can still reference back to this de-empower, because this is exactly how this came about. I had no idea really what I was supposed to be doing, or how I was supposed to be arranging things, or how I should be doing my classes, when I should be using inheritance and stuff like that. But as I basically finished or started doing the initial versions of this, there were times when I was like, oh, the way I'm doing it's not going to work, and I would just completely scrap everything and start over with my new knowledge in mind. And this helped me immensely. I can probably even accredit this piece of software to getting me one of my pretty big first jobs in coding, because at one point this little piece of software had like 50 stars, and I made it private for a while, so it lost all its stars, so now it's only got like 5. But when I was new at university, and I was the only student that had a public repo with a whole bunch of stars from their custom thing, it looked really good, and it looked really good on my resume. But really, I had no idea what I was doing, and I was scared I was going to get sued if it got too popular, since I was basically just using a bunch of stuff from the Dungeons and Dragons books and slapping it all in there with my own systems around them. But I've since learned that I should probably not care about that too much unless I'm actually making money from it, and I'm not. It's only a personal project. If I got yelled at for it, I would just make it private again, and it's not going anywhere. Or I would probably try to work with a person, being like, look, buy it? We buy it? Yeah? All right, let's move on. An architect's most useful tools are an eraser at the drafting board and a wrecking bar at the site. So basically, yeah, just do it. Just if you feel like it needs rewritten, go for it. Now, in this day and age, the great thing about this is we have version control. So you can just set your old version aside and start a whole new one without deleting and wrecking everything. I hope you have enjoyed this video essay about the big ball of mud, the spaghetti code, and I maybe have some ideas going forward. Highly recommend visiting the site, and all the acknowledgements and everything are here. It's a lot of information. I tried to cover the basics so that you can kind of get a general understanding of these concepts and these ideas and how to handle things, even if just a little bit. So thank you for watching my video here on Code Tech and Tutorials. My name is Matt. I make videos about all things code and generally whatever I feel like I try to put them out as often as possible. And I could use your support in keeping these going. Just a like or a sub means a lot. If you want to go the extra mile and get some bonus stuff, bonus content, because I do post member only videos, hit the join button down below and join the channel. It's super cheap. It is the price of an overpriced Starbucks coffee, actually less than that per month, and it would mean the world to me. We also have a growing Discord that is full of other coders that love to talk about anything code related. So if you need some more code related stuff in your life, consider joining the Code Tech Tutorials Discord and chatting us up. We got some new features such as an auto leveling system. All the old school members are kind of out of that because they've been around forever, but yeah, if you get in there you can get levels. Don't worry, the levels don't actually mean anything other than you've probably been there and chatted for a while, but yeah, we'd love to hear your ideas, hear your insights, and talk about programming and stuff and learn from each other. And we also have an area to share projects. Well, you get the point. Just join it. All right, we'll see you there. And I'm going to drop a few other links that are free for you to help support me. Like, well, this channel doesn't quite make ends meet yet. I would love for it to, so helping me grow means a lot, but I'm going to leave a few links to some other things I do to keep my finances in check, and some of those are just investing. So I'm going to leave a link to Coinbase where you can get into crypto and stuff, and maybe I'll make a little video about that, but I don't want to be an advisor because I ain't responsible for all your decisions. However, just joining via my link gets you a little bit of free Bitcoin, and me a little bit of free Bitcoin for referring to you. It's a non-sponsored link, but it would help me. And also I'm going to do the same for a trading website called Webull, and if you join via my link you get some free stocks and I get a little bit of free stocks, so it just helps me out. And since this is an unsponsored video, I feel okay dropping those in there. I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you in the next episode. Peace out, guys.